The Chamber of Eternal Voices was the oldest structure in the known galaxy. It floated at the center of everything, a station the size of a small moon, built by species that had turned to dust long before humans learned to make fire. For 12,000 years, the galactic conquered had met here to decide the fate of civilizations. 37 elder species, 37 votes. Their word was law across a billion stars. High Arbiter Eth stood at the center of the great chamber, her body made of living crystal that caught the pale light and scattered it like broken rainbows. She was old even by the standards of her ancient race, and she had presided over the conquered for 3 centuries. In all that time, she had never seen the council so united in fear. The subject of their fear was a small blue planet called Earth, and the strange creatures who had crawled up from its mud to reach the stars. Species 7421, Eth announced, her voice ringing through the massive space. Designation human. Origin Sol system Orion arm. Status concerning. Around her, the delegates of 37 species shifted in their seats. They came in all shapes and sizes. There were massive creatures of stone and metal, their bodies forged in the hearts of dying stars. There were beings of pure energy, contained in shells of their own making. They resembled insects the size of ground vehicles, their compound eyes reflecting everything and revealing nothing. They had one thing in common: they were all afraid. Ambassador Al of the collective rose to speak. His voice sounded like grinding boulders. 300 years, that is all. 300 years since these humans discovered faster-than-light travel, and already they have spread across 200 worlds. They breed like parasites. They adapt like viruses. They learn too fast. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The delegate clicked his mandibles in what passed for applause among his kind. They are not content to simply exist, Al continued. They build, they explore, they ask questions that should not be asked, and worst of all, they inspire others. The younger species look at humanity and see possibility. They see hope. This is dangerous. Eth nodded slowly, her crystalline form chiming with the movement. The reports are clear. Human technology now rivals species 10 times their age. Their population grows at rates we have not seen since the first expansion, and they show no signs of slowing down. Then we must slow them down, said the delegate, her energy form crackling with impatience. We have tools for this. We have always had tools for this. Everyone in the chamber knew what she meant. The mandate of guidance was an ancient law, created in the early days of the conquered. It allowed the elder species to take control of younger civilizations that grew too fast or too dangerous. The mandate was a gentle word for what it really meant. It meant chains. It meant cages. It meant the end of freedom for any species unlucky enough to fall under its shadow. The humans will be confined to their home system, Eth said, reading from the proposal before her. Their colonies will be placed under the administration of elder species. Their technology will be monitored and guided to acceptable levels of development. Their expansion will cease. And if they resist, asked a delegate from the back of the chamber. Eth's crystal body darkened. They will not be given the opportunity to resist. The mandate will be enforced before they even know it exists. By the time they understand what has happened, it will be too late. The vote was called. One by one, the 37 elder species cast their judgment. The voted yes. The voted yes. The voted yes. Every single delegate, without exception, voted to cage humanity. 37 votes, unanimous. Eth raised her arms, ancient words of power flowing from her like music. By the authority of the galactic conquered, by the laws that have governed this galaxy for 12,000 years, I seal this decree. Species 7421, known as humanity, is hereby placed under the mandate of guidance. Let no voice challenge this decision. Let no force oppose this will. The ceremonial lights dimmed and then blazed bright again, signaling that the decree had been recorded in the eternal archives. It was done. In the morning, fleets would be dispatched, diplomats would deliver ultimatums, and humanity would learn its place in the grand order of things. The delegates began to rise from their seats, satisfied with their work. Some were already discussing how to divide the spoils of human territory. Others were planning which human technologies they would claim for themselves. A few simply felt relief that the threat had been contained before it could grow any larger. Then the doors began to open. The Chamber of Eternal Voices had great doors at its entrance, massive constructs of metal and energy that stood 100 meters tall. They had not been opened without invitation in 8,000 years. The security systems that protected them were considered unbreakable. The codes that controlled them were known only to the highest members of the conquered. But now those doors were moving. Slowly, impossibly, they were swinging inward. Alarms screamed to life. Security drones dropped from hidden compartments in the ceiling. Armed guards rushed to form defensive lines. The delegates scrambled backward in panic, their ancient dignity forgotten in the face of the unknown. Through the widening gap in the doors, light spilled into the chamber, and through that light walked three figures. They were small compared to most of the beings in the room. They had no natural armor, no built-in weapons, no obvious adaptations for survival. They wore simple clothing in dark colors. They carried nothing in their hands. They were human. The one in the center was a woman with dark hair and calm eyes. She walked as if she belonged here, as if she had every right to stand in the most sacred space in the galaxy. The two who flanked her moved with quiet confidence, a man in a military uniform and a woman carrying a small data device. The chamber had gone completely silent. Even the alarms seemed to fade as every eye focused on the impossible sight before them. The woman in the center stopped walking. She looked up at High Arbiter Eth and she smiled. "High Arbiter," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "We received your invitation. I hope we're not too late." Eth's crystalline form flickered with colors that had no name in any human language. "There was no invitation. This is a violation of sacred law. You have no right to be here." The woman's smile did not waver. "Actually, we do, and I think you know it." Behind her, the great doors finished their motion and stood fully open. And in that moment, everything the Galactic conquered thought they knew about humanity began to crumble. The chaos in the Chamber of Eternal Voices was unlike anything the elder species had ever witnessed. Security drones swarmed around the three humans like angry insects, their weapons charged and ready. Armed guards shouted commands in a dozen different languages. Delegates who had ruled empires for thousands of years scrambled over each other in their rush to get away from the intruders. Through it all, the three humans stood perfectly still. Ambassador kept her eyes fixed on High Arbiter Eth. She had trained for this moment for years. She had studied every species in this room, learned their languages, memorized their histories, analyzed their fears. She knew exactly what she was doing. Beside her, Admiral stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He was a soldier, and soldiers knew how to wait. He counted the security drones. He noted the positions of the guards. He calculated escape routes and threat levels with the automatic precision of someone who had spent decades preparing for the worst. On the other side, Doctor clutched her data device and tried to keep her breathing steady. She was a scientist, not a diplomat or a warrior, but she had information that could change everything, and that knowledge gave her strength. "Seize them," the delegate screamed, his massive body rising to its full height. "They are criminals, invaders. Execute them where they stand." The security drones moved closer, could feel their targeting systems locking onto her, could hear the hum of weapons preparing to fire. She did not flinch. "Before you do anything hasty," she said, her voice calm and clear, "I suggest you consult Article 7, Section 12 of your own charter." The chamber went quiet. Eth's crystalline form flickered with confusion. "What did you say?" Doctor stepped forward, her data device projecting text into the air above her head. The words were written in Old, a language that had been declared dead for 6,000 years. Article 7, Section 12 of the Founding Charter of the Galactic Concord. Any species subject to a mandate of guidance may request a formal hearing before the full council within one standard rotation of the decree sealing. She paused to let the words sink in. The decree was sealed approximately 4 minutes ago. We are formally requesting our hearing. Silence, complete and total silence. Then Ambassador Al laughed, a sound like an avalanche. Impossible. That clause exists only in the original charter. It was written in Old. No one has spoken that language in. There is no way these creatures could know about it. Admiral smiled, and there was no warmth in it. We know everything about you, Ambassador. We know about the secret trade agreements you made with the Outer Rim species. We know about the resource extraction operations you've been hiding from the Council. We know about the unmarked graves on Colony 7. Al's stone body went very still. We didn't come here blind, said. We've been watching. We've been listening. We've been learning. Did you really think you could discuss our fate in secret? Did you believe we couldn't translate a dead language when our survival depended on it? Eth raised her arms and the security drones backed away. The guards lowered their weapons. The High Arbiter's crystal form had gone pale, almost transparent. You have been spying on the Conquered, she said. We have been protecting ourselves, corrected. There's a difference. When 37 of the most powerful species in the galaxy start meeting in secret to discuss your future, you pay attention. The delegate crackled with angry energy. This changes nothing. Spy on us all you want. Learn our secrets, it doesn't matter. The mandate has been sealed. Your hearing will change nothing. Turn to face her. Then why do you look so afraid? The question hung in the air like smoke. You're right that we're young, continued, walking slowly toward the center of the chamber. 300 years among the stars. A blink of an eye compared to your ancient civilizations. But in those 300 years, we've learned something important. She stopped walking and turned in a slow circle, meeting the eyes of every delegate in the room. We've learned that the Galactic Concord isn't about peace. It isn't about cooperation. It isn't about guiding younger species toward a better future. Her voice hardened. It's about control. It's about keeping power in the hands of those who already have it. It's about making sure no one ever grows strong enough to challenge you. That is a lie, Eth said, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it? Gestured toward Doctor, who pulled up a new display. Star charts filled the air, showing the expansion of the Concord over 12,000 years. In all that time, how many younger species have been given a seat on this council? How many have been allowed to grow to their full potential? She pointed at the charts. The answer is 0. Every single species that showed promise was either conquered, contained, or quietly eliminated. The mandate of guidance isn't guidance. It's a death sentence for civilizations that dare to dream too big. The delegate clicked his mandibles in outrage. We preserve order. We prevent war. We maintain stability across a galaxy that would tear itself apart without us. You preserve your own power, Admiral said quietly. You prevent change. You maintain a system where you will always be on top and everyone else will always be beneath you. Nodded. We know what happens to species under the mandate. We've seen the records you tried to hide. The isolated for 2,000 years until they forgot how to dream. Their population reduced by 90% through guided development. The countless others who simply disappeared from history, their names erased, their cultures forgotten. She walked toward Eth until she stood directly below the High Arbiter's platform. You voted to do the same thing to us, 37 species, unanimous. You decided to cage humanity without even letting us speak. His voice dropped to almost a whisper, but somehow it carried to every corner of the vast chamber. That was a mistake. Eth leaned forward, her crystalline form casting fractured light across face. "Is that a threat, Ambassador?" Smiled. "No, High Arbiter, it's a warning. Humanity doesn't threaten, we don't bluff, we don't play games with the lives of civilizations." She straightened her shoulders. "We came here to talk, to negotiate, to find a solution that works for everyone. But if you won't listen to us, if you insist on treating us like animals to be caged, then you need to understand something very clearly." She turned to face the full council one more time. "We will not be controlled. We will not be contained. We will not quietly fade into history like so many species before us. If you want to put chains on humanity, you had better bring more than ancient laws and outdated assumptions." The chamber was silent. The delegates of 37 elder species looked at the small human woman standing alone in the middle of their sacred space, and for the first time in 12,000 years, they felt something they had almost forgotten. They felt doubt. "Now," said her smile returning, "shall we begin our hearing? I think you'll find what we have to say very interesting." High Arbiter Eth gestured, and seats rose from the floor for the three humans. It was a small gesture, but everyone in the chamber understood its meaning. The humans were being given a voice. After 12,000 years of the conquered making decisions about younger species without their input, something had changed. Sat down, but her companions remained standing. Admiral took a position behind her right shoulder. Doctor moved to the left, already preparing her data displays. They had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. They knew exactly what they needed to do. "You have your hearing," Eth said, her crystal body still pale with uncertainty. "Speak your piece. Convince us, if you can, that humanity does not deserve the mandate." Nodded and rose to her feet. "Thank you, High Arbiter, but before I make our case, I want to show you something. Doctor." The scientist activated her device, and the entire chamber transformed. Holographic images surrounded the delegates, blocking out the walls and ceiling. Suddenly they were floating in space, surrounded by stars and planets and the vast emptiness between them. "This is the galaxy as it was 300 years ago when humanity first achieved faster-than-light travel." Gestured, and certain star systems began to glow. "These are the regions that were experiencing crises at that time: plagues, famines, wars, natural disasters." The delegates watched as dozens of systems lit up in angry red. "And this," continued, "is what humans did." Golden lines began to spread from Earth, reaching out to touch the troubled systems. With each connection, the red faded to calm blue. "The blight," Doctor said, highlighting one of the systems. "A disease that had devastated the outer rim species for 600 years. Your scientists studied it. Your doctors worked on it. You declared it incurable." She paused. "Human researchers solved it in 11 years. We sent medical teams to every affected world. We gave away the cure for free. We asked for nothing in return." Murmurs spread through the chamber. The delegate, a being of flowing liquid contained in a transparent shell, made a sound of agreement. His species had indeed been saved by human medicine. Everyone knew it, though the conquered had never officially acknowledged the fact. "The drift barrier," Admiral said, taking over. The display shifted to show a region of unstable space, filled with gravitational anomalies and energy storms. 2,000 years ago, this barrier appeared without warning. It cut off the people from the rest of the galaxy. Your engineers said it was impassable. Your ships couldn't survive the crossing." He smiled grimly. "Human navigators mapped safe routes through the barrier in 3 years. Today, the trade with 40 different systems. They're rebuilding their civilization. They're dreaming again." Stepped forward, and the display changed again. This time it showed scenes of disaster and suffering, but also scenes of hope. Human ships bringing food to starving colonies. Human doctors treating the sick and wounded. Human engineers rebuilding damaged infrastructure. Human teachers sharing knowledge with anyone who wanted to learn. The food crisis. The terraform failures on Prime. the refugee situation after the hegemony wars, the energy shortage in the outer colonies. She named each crisis, and the display showed humanity's response to each one. Every time there was a problem, humans answered the call, not because we wanted power, not because we sought to gain advantage, but because we could help, and so we did. The chamber had gone very quiet. The delegates were watching the displays with expressions that ranged from confusion to suspicion to something that might have been shame. "Now let me tell you what humanity has not done," said, and her voice grew harder. "In 300 years of expansion, we have not colonized a single world with existing intelligent life. Not one. We have bypassed dozens of planets that would have been perfect for human settlement because they were already home to developing species. Species that will never know how close they came to being conquered." She turned to face Ambassador Al directly. "Can the collective say the same?" The stone giant did not answer. "We have not developed weapons of mass extinction," continued. "We have the technology. We've had it for centuries. We could build devices that would sterilize entire planets, weapons that would make the sun itself go dark. We've done the research. We understand the science." She paused. "We chose not to build them." She looked at the delegate. "Can your species say the same?" The energy being's form flickered, but remained silent. "We have not formed military alliances against the conquered," gestured, and the display showed diplomatic records, meeting logs, communication transcripts. "Dozens of species have approached us. They wanted us to lead a rebellion against the elder races. They offered us soldiers, ships, resources. They begged us to help them break free from your control." She let the weight of that statement hang in the air. "We said no. Every single time we said no. Because we didn't come to the stars to make war. We came to explore, to learn, to build, to help." The display faded, and the chamber returned to its normal appearance. Stood alone in the center of the vast space, surrounded by beings who had ruled the galaxy since before her species learned to write. "You fear us because we grow fast," she said softly. "Because we adapt. Because we solve problems that have defeated ancient civilizations. Because we don't wait for permission to help those in need." She spread her hands. "But in 300 years, humanity has started 0 wars, 0 genocides, 0 imperial conquests. We have never enslaved another species. We have never destroyed a civilization. We have never wiped out a culture or erased a people from history." Her eyes swept the chamber, meeting the gaze of delegate after delegate. "Can every species in this room say the same?" The silence that followed was answer enough. High Arbiter Eth's crystal form had taken on complex patterns of color, emotions too alien for humans to read. "You paint a pretty picture, Ambassador, but history is full of species that started with good intentions and ended with blood on their hands." "Yes," agreed. "It is, and that's exactly why we're here. Not to prove that humanity is perfect. We're not. We've made mistakes. We've caused harm. We've failed to live up to our own ideals more times than I can count." She walked toward Eth's platform, her steps echoing in the silent chamber. "We're here to prove that we deserve a chance, that we deserve to be judged by what we've actually done, not by what you fear we might do, that we deserve to have a voice in our own future." She stopped at the base of the platform and looked up at the ancient being who held her species' fate in crystalline hands. "Give us that chance, High Arbiter. Let us show you what humanity can really do, not as your prisoners, not as your subjects, as your partners." Eth stared down at the small human for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice was heavy with the weight of 12,000 years. "Even if everything you've said is true, it changes nothing. The mandate was voted upon. The decree was sealed. The law cannot be undone simply because you ask nicely." Smiled, and there was something in that smile that made the elder species very nervous. "I know," she said. "That's why we brought a counteroffer." The word hung in the air like the moment before a storm breaks. Counteroffer. The delegates of the Galactic Concord exchanged uncertain glances. In 12,000 years of history, no younger species had ever been in a position to offer the Council anything. The very idea went against everything they understood about power and its proper order. Ambassador Al rose from his seat, his stone body grinding with barely contained rage. Counteroffer. You speak as if you have something we want. You are a young species, barely out of your cradle world. What could you possibly offer us? Turned to face him, and her smile grew wider. I'm glad you asked, Ambassador. She gestured to Doctor, who activated her data device once more. The display that appeared this time was different from what had come before. This was not a history lesson. This was a revelation. Star maps filled the chamber, showing the galaxy in incredible detail. Trade routes appeared as glowing lines connecting thousands of systems, but these were not conquered trade routes. These were something else entirely. For the past century, said, humanity has been building, not weapons, not armies, infrastructure, communication networks that span entire sectors, trade agreements that bypass conquered oversight, emergency response systems that don't wait for council approval to help those in need. She pointed at the map, and certain regions began to light up in bright gold. These are systems that have joined what we call the Terran Alliance, not through conquest, not through force, through partnership, through mutual aid, through the simple principle that cooperation produces better outcomes than domination. The delegates stared at the display in growing horror. The golden regions covered far more of the galaxy than they had expected, far more than should have been possible for a species so young. You've been creating an empire, the delegate accused, his mandibles clicking with fury. You've been conquering territory behind our backs. No, Admiral said firmly. We've been building alternatives. There's a very important difference. He stepped forward, his military uniform a stark contrast to the ornate robes and shells and energy fields of the elder species. The conquered controls through dependency. You make sure that younger species need you for trade, for protection, for technology. Without you, their economies collapse, their defenses fail, they have no choice but to obey. He shook his head. Humanity offers something different. We share freely. We teach without restrictions. We help without conditions. And in doing so, added, we've made the conquered irrelevant to more and more of the galaxy. Ev's crystalline form blazed with sudden light. This is betrayal. This is the very threat we feared. You've been undermining us from the beginning. We've been providing options, corrected. Is that really so threatening? Are you so certain that the only way to maintain order is through control? Are you so afraid that given a choice, species will choose not to be controlled? The question struck home. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The representative made a sound that might have been agreement. Doctor pulled up new data, economic analyses that painted a clear picture. In systems aligned with the Terran Alliance, economic growth has increased by an average of 300%. Technological advancement has accelerated by similar margins. Quality of life indices have improved across every measurable metric. In conquered controlled systems, she continued, her voice taking on a harder edge, growth remains stagnant. Development is restricted. Potential goes unrealized generation after generation. We provide stability, the delegate protested. We prevent the chaos that comes from uncontrolled expansion. You provide stagnation, said, and you call it peace. She walked toward the center of the chamber, her movements slow and deliberate. Every eye followed her. So here's our counteroffer. You can try to enforce the mandate of guidance. You can send your fleets to Earth. You can attempt to conquer 200 human worlds and bring us to heel. She paused, letting the words sink in. But before you do, you should understand what that will cost. Admiral activated his own display, and the star maps shifted to show military dispositions. Conquered fleet positions appeared in red. Human positions appeared in blue, but there was more. Green markers showed the forces of allied species. Yellow markers showed systems that had declared neutrality but would likely side with humanity if war broke out. The Terran Alliance has a combined fleet larger than the Conquered's primary naval forces, said calmly. Our technology is different from yours, but it is not inferior. Our soldiers are well-trained and highly motivated. A war between us would not be the quick suppression action you're imagining. It would be a long, bloody conflict that would devastate entire sectors of the galaxy. You're threatening us, Al growled. I'm giving you information, replied. What you do with it is your choice. Raised her hand, and the military display faded. She didn't want this to become about weapons and fleets. That wasn't why they were here. We didn't come to make threats, she said. We came to offer you something better, a future where we work together instead of against each other, a galaxy where every species has a voice, not just the ones who happen to achieve first. She turned in a slow circle, addressing every delegate in turn. Reform the conquered, end the mandates of guidance, create a new council where every species, young and old, has representation, make decisions through consensus instead of domination. Impossible, Eth said, but her voice lacked its earlier certainty. The conquered has functioned this way for 12,000 years. We cannot simply abandon our traditions because one young species demands it. Your traditions have brought the galaxy to the edge of stagnation, replied. Your system has crushed countless civilizations before they could reach their potential. Your laws have turned the elder species from guides into jailers. She walked toward Eth's platform until she stood directly below the High Arbiter. Change is coming whether you want it or not. The younger species are tired of being controlled. They're tired of watching their people suffer while the council debates. They're tired of asking permission to progress. She looked up at the ancient crystalline being. Humanity is offering you a chance to be part of what comes next, to use your wisdom and experience to help build something better, to be remembered as the generation that finally let the galaxy grow. Her voice softened. Or you can fight us. You can start a war that will kill billions. You can try to put chains on a species that will never stop struggling to be free. And in the end, whether you win or lose, you will have proven that the conquered was never about guidance at all. It was always about control. The chamber was absolutely silent. The delegates of 37 elder species looked at the small human woman and saw their own future reflected in her eyes. Two paths stretched before them, war and resistance, or change and partnership. High Arbiter Eth stared down at for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. You ask us to give up everything we are, everything we've built. You ask us to trust a species we don't understand, that grows too fast, that frightens us with its potential. Nodded slowly. Yes, that's exactly what we're asking. And if we refuse? His expression didn't change. Then we leave this chamber and prepare for what comes next. And I promise you, High Arbiter, whatever happens after that, the galaxy will never be the same. Eth closed her eyes, and her crystalline form dimmed until she was almost invisible. Show us, she said finally. Show us what you've really built. Show us why we should trust you. Smiled. I thought you'd never ask. Doctor activated the final display, and the chamber of eternal voices transformed one last time. The holographic images that surrounded the delegates were different now. These weren't maps or statistics or military positions. These were faces. Thousands of faces from hundreds of different species filled the chamber. The freed from their 2,000-year isolation, building new cities on worlds they had only dreamed of reaching. Their population recovering from the plague that had nearly destroyed them, their children playing in streets that had once been filled with the dying. Species the conquered had written off as too weak or too primitive, now thriving with human help and partnership. The Terran alliance isn't just an economic agreement, said softly. It's a family. She walked among the holographic faces, her hand passing through images of beings she had never met but whose stories she knew by heart. These are the species who chose to work with us, not because we conquered them, not because we threatened them, because we treated them as equals, because we listened to them, because we helped them without asking for anything in return. The display shifted to show something else. Numbers, population counts, economic growth, technological achievement, education rates, health outcomes, quality of life indices, every measurable standard of civilization success. In every single metric that matters, Doctor said, alliance-aligned species are outperforming conquered-controlled species, not by small margins, by orders of magnitude. The data is undeniable. Ambassador Al made a sound of disgust. Numbers can be manipulated. Statistics can be made to say anything. Then send your own observers, Admiral said. Visit Alliance worlds, talk to their people, see for yourself what we've built. He stepped forward, his posture no longer military but almost pleading. That's all we're asking. Just look, just see. Don't make your decision based on fear or prejudice or 12,000 years of doing things the same way. Make it based on evidence. The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted at each other in a dozen languages. Ancient alliances that had held for began to crack under the weight of what they were hearing. The accused the of conspiracy. The threatened immediate military action against any species that sided with the humans. Through it all, stood calm and still at the center of the storm. Finally, High Arbiter Eth raised her arms, and her crystal body blazed with light so bright that everyone had to look away. When the light faded, the chamber was silent. Enough, Eth said, and her voice carried the weight of ages. Enough. She descended from her platform, something she had not done in 300 years. Slowly, carefully, she walked toward until they stood face to face. I have lived for 6,000 years, Eth said quietly. I have seen species rise and fall. I have watched civilizations burn and others take their place. I have made decisions that shaped the fate of billions. She reached out one crystalline hand and touched the shoulder. In all that time, I have never seen anything like humanity. You terrify me, Ambassador. Not because you are dangerous, though you are. Not because you are powerful, though you are becoming so. You terrify me because you make me wonder if everything I've believed for 6,000 years was wrong. Met her gaze steadily. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. The past doesn't have to define the future. Eth was silent for a long moment. Then she turned to face the assembled council. I am going to do something unprecedented, she announced. I am going to call for a new vote. The chamber exploded with protests. Delegates screamed that it was impossible, that the law forbade it, that the mandate had been sealed and could not be undone. Eth waited until they exhausted themselves. The law says that any species under a mandate may request a hearing, she said when silence returned. It does not say the council cannot reconsider its decision after hearing new evidence. I am invoking arbiter's privilege, a power that has not been used in 9,000 years, to call for reconsideration. She looked at him. You asked for a chance to prove yourselves. Here it is. But understand this, Ambassador. If we vote to reconsider, if we agree to give humanity a chance, there will be conditions. There will be oversight. There will be accountability. Nodded, we wouldn't have it any other way. And if you betray our trust, Eth continued, her voice hardening, if your species proves to be the threat we feared, I will personally lead the fleet that burns Earth to ashes. Do you understand? I do, said, and I accept, because I know what humanity really is. I know what we can become, and I know that if you give us a chance, you'll see it too. Eth held her gaze for a long moment. Then she turned back to the council. The vote is called. All in favor of reconsidering the mandate of guidance against species 7,421. One by one, hands and tentacles and energy fields rose throughout the chamber. The voted yes first, followed by several smaller species who had benefited from human aid. Then, to everyone's surprise, the delegate voted yes. Then another elder species. And another. Al watched in disbelief as the tide turned against him. "This is madness," he growled. "You're dooming us all." But the votes kept coming. In the end, 23 of 37 species voted to reconsider, a clear majority, the first time in history that the Council had reversed itself on a mandate. Eth raised her arms one final time. "The mandate of guidance against humanity is suspended pending further review. A joint committee will be formed to establish terms for cooperation between the Galactic Concord and the Terran Alliance." She looked at, and something that might have been a smile crossed her alien features. "Congratulations, Ambassador, you've done the impossible. Now comes the hard part, proving you deserve it." Bowed her head in acknowledgement. "Thank you, High Arbiter. I promise you won't regret this." 3 months later, the first Joint Council met in the Chamber of Eternal Voices. For the first time in 12,000 years, younger species had seats at the table. For the first time, decisions were made through consensus rather than decree. For the first time, the galaxy began to move forward instead of standing still. The years that followed were not easy. There were conflicts and setbacks and moments when it seemed like the whole experiment would collapse. But humanity never stopped building bridges, never stopped reaching out, never stopped believing that together was better than alone. In the histories written centuries later, scholars would mark that day in the chamber as the beginning of a new era. The day when the old order gave way to something better. The day when one small species from an unremarkable planet changed the galaxy forever. Not through conquest, not through war, through the simple, powerful belief that every civilization deserves a chance to grow, that helping others is strength, not weakness, that the only way forward is together. Lived long enough to see the Galactic Commonwealth take shape, a union of equals where every voice mattered. On her deathbed, surrounded by friends from a dozen different species, she was asked what she wanted to be remembered for. She smiled, her eyes still bright after all those years. "Remember that we tried," she said. "Remember that when given the choice between fear and hope, we chose hope. And remember that it worked." Those words were carved into the monument built in her honor, standing at the heart of the new Commonwealth capital. Visitors from across the galaxy came to read them and to marvel at what one small species had accomplished. And above the monument, the stars shone down on a galaxy that had finally learned to dream again.